Welcome to your Tuesday tutorial. And today we're going to look at the halfway lift. Okay, so halfway lift, we do it in our sun salutations. Okay, when we're in our standing forward fold, we lift halfway and then transition back through the sun salutation. When we're coming forward, we come forward to the top of the mat and land in halfway lift. So this is something that I work with at the very beginning of our yoga teacher trainings, because a lot of people do the halfway lift wrong. They do the halfway lift with the hands on the shins instead of the hands on the floor. And I want all of my students and my teacher trainees to teach halfway lift with the hands on the floor. So I'm going to talk to you about that now. So first you've got to understand where the halfway lift comes from. It comes from our sun salutation, really the Ashtanga lineage or the Ashtanga practice. We're lifting the torso halfway to create space to go back into our chaturanga. And so we're looking for length of the spine. We're looking to create space between the torso and the legs. So let's have a look at the pose. Okay, so from your forward fold, you're coming up into the halfway lift. So you can see there's this space created here. And then I can go back into my high plank and move through chaturanga. If I were practicing for a long time, I would take this halfway lift, ground into the palms and float back and land in chaturanga. But for most students, we step back into high plank and then lower into chaturanga, okay? And so we want the space, we want the length of the spine, and then we want to be able to place the palms flat, ground them down on the floor to get back into the plank or into the chaturanga. So the hands are always flat when you transition, okay? If I put my hands on my shins to get the halfway lift, well, why would I put the hands on the shins? Most people put the hands on the shins to take their halfway lift if they think they don't have the flexibility to keep the hands on the floor, okay? You can bend your knees and take a halfway lift. Absolutely. There is nothing wrong with taking a big bend in the knee for your halfway lift, okay? Because what we're looking for is the length of the spine, which you've got here, and the space that you're creating here to make room to go back. So if I come up here, I can get the length of the spine, but I have to go back down to get back into my high plank. So therefore, the reason why you're doing the halfway lift in the first place is irrelevant, because it's a move, but it's losing its purpose because I've slid my hands up the legs to get back, if that makes sense, okay? So that's the first thing. What's the intention? Why are we doing the pose in the first place, okay? And if it's to create the space to go back, then keep the hands on the floor, okay? If the legs feel like the back of the legs are tight, halfway lift feels challenging with the hands on the floor, bend your knees and work in the direction of straightening the legs. Eventually, when we work with the hands on the floor, the legs eventually will straighten. They might, right? They may not ever get straight, but we can work in that direction, okay? Little by little, it gives you somewhere to work with. Okay, my hands are on the floor. I might start with the halfway lift here. Over time, it goes to here, maybe goes to here, okay? But if I slide my hands up the legs, nothing changes. Nothing will ever change. I'm not working in the direction of hands down, legs straight. I'm not giving myself anywhere to go. Okay, so you'll always be in the same place. You'll never see any shift or any change. So hands on the floor is going to help with progression in the pose, in the back of the legs, And so that's one reason for keeping the hands on the floor. The other reason that often the students who feel like they need to bring the hands up the legs will often be the ones that really put a lot of weight into the hands. And then you're pushing the leg back, causing the knee to lock and the hips to go back. Okay? So, hands on the floor, much less likely to go into hyperextension in the knee, lock out the legs, or shift the weight back into the heels. Okay? So, with your halfway lift, you may have the habit of sliding your hands up the legs, and it takes time to change that, to shift, to go back to something, to go on to something different. But give it a go. Try putting the hands on the floor. Go in the direction of straight legs. The knees can be bent, they don't have to be straight, but you should feel sensation in the back of the legs. You want to feel the stretch in the back of the legs. Work to create the length of the spine, and then see over, practicing a couple of weeks, couple of months, what happens? How does it shift? How does it change? And see what the outcome is. Yeah. And then always think about palms flat to the floor on your transition, not necessarily not part of a halfway lift tutorial, but the halfway lift really is part of your transition. We don't necessarily hang out in halfway lift as a pose on its own, but it's a transition. So when you go to step back, or when you go to step forward, when you move around the mat and your hands are down, your palms, you want them flat to the floor. Okay. So rather than staying up on the fingertips, if you're on your fingertips, and transitioning back with the hands up like that, you want to put the palms flat and go back from there. Right, so you've got that deep connection with the hand and the floor, no pressure in the joints of the fingers, much nicer way to transition. So give it a go, see how you get on. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll be back next week.